There's a lot of podcasts out there, but this one, you never know what to expect. It's always fun. Feel all the emotions with your host, Mercedes Rich, and every surprise guest. Now it's time. And the artist is
Michael Cochren of Cochren and Company. And I'm your host, Mercedes Rich.
Who is Michael Cochren and how did you get started in music?
Yeah, well, I was born in a small town in Indiana, and music was just a huge part of my family's life when I was growing up. My grandparents always had music on. They always had like the Gaither homecoming, like Southern gospel on. My grandpa sang in church all the time. My grandma was a church organist, and my dad played guitar and loved to sing. So it was just like in my blood from an early age. And in middle school, it became pretty clear to me that I was not going to be an NBA player. So I started diving in a little heavier into music. I joined the bands in school. And then when I got into high school, I got asked to drum for a band of my peers, like a kind of like a harder rock band. And we traveled around and just in the Midwest, like, Indiana, Illinois, whatever. And it was like, I got the bug for like traveling and playing music. And so towards the end of my schooling, I started playing piano, and I just watched a ton of Billy Joel YouTube videos over and over again and tried to play piano like him. Started writing music, put a band together in college, and started traveling around here and there, anywhere that people would let us play for, pizza or for $5 or whatever. And I just along the lines there I was raised in the church, and my faith kind of became my own in college. And that was the same time period that my music began to change, and the songs that I was writing, you began to hear what was happening in my heart come through in the lyrics. And I was getting asked to sing at more and more churches, more and more church functions, and started writing exclusively Christian music for the church. And gosh, next thing you know, we've built up playing music enough to where, if a national artist was coming through, like Newsboys or somebody like that, we might get asked to open in like the early spot of the night or something. And we did that for a couple years in our area, and then we just met the right people at the right time. Like God opened a door. I met some managers from Nashville, and I came down to Nashville, spent some time down there, and met several record labels. And one of those labels was a label called Goatee Records, which was founded by Toby Mac. And after praying through it, we decided to go with that label, and we released a song that I had written a few years earlier about my story called Church, and just what it's like to be brought up in the church and maybe walk away for whatever reason, and then realize maybe that's where the gold was at after all. And that's kind of my story in a nutshell. And we've been able to play music around ever since then. So we're just enjoying the ride.
Yeah. Well, I mean, being brought up in the church too, what was the transition like from a rock band that you did in high school to Christian music? Because those are like two like opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, it was a slow transition for sure. You know, we the scene that we were in playing drum, it was a lot of basement clubs and a little bit rowdy. I call it my testimony building days. I didn't really know what I was doing at the time, but it wasn't what I should have been doing. And sometimes you got to take the long way around to figure out where you're supposed to be. And that's definitely my story. But when I first put a band together, we were still playing a lot of rock music. And, my dad was a huge Eagles fan when I was a kid, and Billy Joel and Jackson Brown and old country stuff. And so that was a major influence for me. And so we were playing a lot of that stuff, playing the bars and playing clubs. And I just slowly wanted to be able to share more of my faith in my show. And it felt like the best place to do that, at least as what I would consider a young, naive believer at the time, was the best place is a safe place for me. And that would be in the church. And we play everywhere now, but just being able to share music that encouraged God's people in the walls of a safe place at the time was really important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and hope is also a lot of what your music is about, a lot of what your songs relate back to. So, is there a specific moment or time in your life that you can think of where you really needed hope?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, ongoing every day still.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I would say the most recent memory that comes to mind, obviously, and maybe it's cliche, I don't know, 2020 was a hard year for all of us.
Yeah.
And that April of that year, probably in May of that year, uh, I I've always struggled with anxiety, I guess, a little bit,
Mm.
just more like worry wart. You call it when you're a kid, it's like I just kind of worrier.
Yeah.
But in those months, it became like, oh, maybe this is something I need to like process and work through. And so those months, certainly the hope of the Lord was like, I have to just consume this every day because the news is not hopeful. And, everything you're hearing in the world is not hopeful. And I need to hear the hope of Christ that, no matter what happens here, he's already met my greatest need and there's a hope beyond this. And I can look to that hope every day and it keeps me going.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And I think that time specifically for all of us, like you said, it was difficult for all of us, but it really, really made us examine everything that we've gone through. Because I know for me, that was a time of transition in my life. And so, really figuring out how to focus on God and what He wants us to do in that season of life is really important.
Yeah, it definitely was a time for everyone to slow down,
Hmm.
forcefully so, and sit in your apartment or your house for a while and just look around and go, what am I doing with my life? Am I happy with what I'm doing in my life? Is the Lord happy? And where do I go from here? Is there a going from here? And what's next for me? Yeah, I think those things are good, even in the stress and the horrible circumstances that came from that. I think so much good has come from that, in that people have been able to reassess, reevaluate, and recenter on, okay, these things are important to me, and this is what I'm going to do to show that in my life.
Yeah, now that it's after that we're kind of coming out of that because it's been 2, 3 years since that happened, the initial part of it. So now that it's after that, what do you think your takeaway was from like your relationship with Christ and everything?
I think my biggest takeaway is that it has to be real.
Mm.
I think I think especially like young people today, they've lived through so much, and I think that we all just want to experience something that's real.
Yeah.
And for my own faith walk, I don't want to just go through the motions anymore. I want it to be genuine. I want to really experience Christ. And as I minister, as I put our music out and our show and whatever, that has to be real too, because I think more and more people can just tell when it's not.
Hmm.
And if we want to do something that impacts people that lasts, it has to be genuine, whether it's in the church walls or out of the church walls or on the stage or off the stage. People are going to be able to tell if we're genuine about what we're believing, what we're trying to live out, or if it's just something that we're doing.
Hmm. And you mentioned not wanting to go through the motions. So as an artist, how do you take each moment captive and really not do that?
Well, not very well sometimes. I don't know. I try, obviously, I mean, being in the word regularly keeps me, I hope, in step with the Spirit, and trying to really hear what the Lord is telling me for each day. But I think also just realizing that it's important for me to be in the room, like, so to speak, like be intentional about being present with people
Mm.
when I'm talking with people, or when I'm on stage. It's so easy just to go, I know what I say every night in between these songs, and we just do our 30-minute set and then we leave the stage. But really trying to be there and be present in the moment and let it happen, and not just let it go by me, but participate in the moment. That's something I'm trying to do very intentionally.
Definitely. I feel like that's kind of the theme for what 2023 should be because for so long we had to kind of like figure out what it meant, like we were talking about a little bit. So coming out of that is a way to be able to not go through the motions because so much of life can become routine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So your individual songs, every single one that you've written, how do they reflect your life and the experiences that you've had? How does it influence your writing when it comes to songwriting and performing and all of that?
Yeah, one of the biggest ways I think that it comes into the writing is I'm always trying to draw on personal experience when I write. I don't want to write about something I don't know about.
Hmm.
Because again, I think people can tell that's not genuine.
Yeah.
And but sometimes I'll write about experiences that other people have had that they've shared with me. Especially early on in my writing, I've been involved at my local church for the past 10 years, and so hearing stories from people that I go to church with, people that are in my small group in my life, those things come in, and their life experience comes into my writing as well. But I think just trying to be transparent in my struggles and in the ways that God is encouraging me, knowing that, I mean, God knows what I do for a living. God knows that I write songs, and I think that He gives me experiences, and I think that He allows me to be encouraged by His word so that I will share that encouragement. And I try to be faithful to that.
Definitely. And you've spoken a lot about the church, and you work in a church because you're a worship leader as well. And so you've had songs about that. So can you speak kind of into how the church fits into the message of hope and being real and genuine?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the church is the vehicle for giving hope to the world. I think that that was Jesus's design.
Mm.
We didn't, mankind didn't just make up church, like,
Yeah.
I mean, if we believe the Bible, then Jesus set it in motion, and it was his idea that there would be a congregation of his followers that would, take the light to the world. And I think when the church is getting that, because I mean, truth be told, we all know churches are not perfect. We've all experienced some level of hurt in the church, whether it's hurt feelings or just seen behind the curtain a little bit. And it's like, I don't know. But when the church is getting it right, and it's when it's really being what Jesus intended, there's nothing on earth as beautiful. There's
Mhm.
nothing on earth as welcoming, as holy, as life giving, and as beautiful for a community and for a family, for individual. Just the hope that can wash over you, whether it's just walking in when you're kind of down and you just see other people that are singing. Like this past Sunday, I had a moment when my wife and I just attended our church. We didn't lead or anything. We just came to church, and there was a moment in the service when everyone was just singing this song at the top of their lungs, and I just sat back. I couldn't even sing. I just sat back and listened, and I was like, man, this makes me believe it.
Mm.
Like it just makes me believe that it's true. There's a
Mhm.
room full of people singing this and they believe it. And that encourages me to just believe it. And
Yeah.
that's just like, it's like an unexplainable hope that washes over you.
Absolutely. So what does that look like whenever you're leading worship? How do you let that influence every single time?
Yeah, for me personally, it's so much harder sometimes to have those experiences when I'm leading because I struggle with focus. so
Oh,
I
yeah.
so I'm like okay, I'm always thinking, what's the next chord? What's the next song? Like, are they singing? Do they like this song? Like, it's hard for me to be in the moment, but when I am in the moment, usually it's those moments when I can step away from the mic and it's like, let's just sing with one voice and we're lifting up the familiar part of the song or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And just hearing the congregation sing back, it's like, okay, this is a moment where we're all in unison saying, this is the truth that we believe about God, and God is with us in the room when
Mhm.
we're singing His praises, and it's a powerful thing.
Absolutely, being able to feel his presence. It's like my youth pastor used to say, "Jesus bumps." Like
Yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah,
it really is an amazing experience whenever you feel the presence of Jesus.
yeah, absolutely.
So if you could take your music, your message, all of it, and wrap it up into one sentence, like your platform, what would it be?
Oh gosh. Um, I would say I'm trying to find uh, unique ways to say timeless truths about God in a way that people will hear and want to listen to over and over.
Hmm.
That's kind of it for me. I'm not trying to say anything new,
Yeah.
but maybe I just want to say it in a way that people haven't heard it,
Hmm.
and in a fun way that they'll want to crank up loud in their car as they're driving.
Definitely. Well, and when you feel discouraged, is there like a certain passage that you go to help you feel refueled in the word?
Yeah, I go to Romans 8 a lot. Um, we know that in all things, Romans 8:28, we know in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who are
Mhm.
called to his purpose. And that's kind of, I cling to that all the time. I was in India for a mission trip a few years ago, and the missionary there is such a faithful man. There's a couple things going on in the mission, and he just kept saying over and over again, "The Lord knows what we need. The Lord knows what we need." And so that passage just reminds me of that simple statement: is like, no matter what's going on, like, if I'm not going to get enough sleep tonight before my flight tomorrow, or whatever it is, it's like the Lord knows the amount of sleep that I need, and
Mhm.
whatever He gives me is what I need. And that's like you can just take the burden off your shoulders at that point and go, it's not my fault if I don't get enough sleep. The Lord knows, and He'll be with me. He'll protect me.
Yeah. Do you have any verses that you would love to write a song about and haven't?
Uh, gosh, I mean, so many.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that one in particular has been on my mind of how to write that song. I also love Isaiah 53:5. He was
Mhm.
wounded for our iniquities, and the chastisement of our peace is placed upon him. I think that would be cool. I don't know how I would say that in like it's kind of a heavy, phrasing, but I would love to write something more about like just the sacrifice of Christ more literally on our behalf.
Yeah, songs like that are the most powerful because they're the ones that hit the deepest.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Yeah, like there's a lot of Hillsong, when I first started leading worship, when it was kind of like all the worship scene was going back to writing hymn like structure songs. And I still some of my favorite worship songs to lead. The wording is just so rich in those verses.
Do you have a song right now that's like on repeat that you can't stop listening to it?
Christ Be Magnified.
Okay.
Yeah, by Cody Carnes.
Yeah.
I know it's not even like a brand new song, but I listen to it all the time. It's my favorite song to lead right now. It's like, man, I love it.
Yeah. All right. So switch it up a little bit to something a little fun. Have you ever written like a silly song, like just one for fun?
Yes, I
What
have.
about?
Okay. I wrote a song several years ago about Billy Joel. Well, kind of. It was because Billy Joel's like my favorite.
Okay.
But it's a love song, and it's called Billy Joel Would Understand. So it uses a ton of song references from Billy Joel. It's really stupid, but yeah.
Ever thought about releasing it, or is it kind of one of those
Oh,
that sits in the
I don't
background?
know. I mean, yeah, it stays in my Dropbox folder. Like I don't know if I'll ever let it see the light of day.
Just pull it out every once in a while when you need a little smile.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
You had a song featured on the new show MacGyver, the reboot. So what was that phone call like whenever you got that phone call saying, "Hey, we're gonna feature your song"?
Well, that was awesome because I grew up watching the original MacGyver reruns with my uncle. So it was cool that the new show was going to use it. And they told me that because I wrote "Don't Lose Hope" just in those months that we talked about earlier, where I just needed hope. That song came from that period where I just wanted to write a song for my wife that would encourage her. And the label loved it. My publishing company loved it, and they're like, "We're gonna see what we can do with this song." And it ended up being the title track of the record. And but when they called me, I was like, "Hey, there's a TV show that wants this song." I was like, "Are you serious?" Like I just wrote that one evening, in my quiet time, and then it actually came out. It aired the same day that the album came out, which was such a cool coincidence. Like it was cool.
Yeah, definitely. I can't even imagine what that call would be like. That would be really cool. Can you speak a little bit more into your songwriting process, especially when it comes to like that song? Like, what exactly do you do? Do you do something the same every single time, or do you switch it up every?
I definitely have like songwriting habits,
Mm,
where I'll spend time writing by myself, where I'll just sit at the piano or sit with the guitar and just try to play melodies, try to play like chord voicings, whatever that starts to kind of inspire me. And I kind of do this thing, which I think a lot of guys probably do, where you begin to sing melodies with like nonsense words
hmm,
and just seeing what feels right, like seeing
yeah.
what I don't know, what if seeing if anything comes to your mind as you're singing, just kind of free form stuff. And then sometimes, like a chorus idea will come then. But then other times I've got the words that I want to write already. Like I've got an idea, a hook, like I want to write this title or this song, like, I want to write about the sacrifice of Christ or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And so then I go in with a lyric idea and I'm trying to put music to it. So it's usually one of those two things. And then if I'm in like a room with other writers in Nashville or wherever, um, it's usually like, what does anybody have an idea in the room? And it's almost always a lyric idea.
Hmm.
But sometimes it's like, I just have this cool melody idea. Does anybody have a lyric idea? That like go with it. So we're usually starting from one of those two places, or just like the all out sit in a room with no ideas and play around until something happens.
Gotcha. Yeah. I know this is kind of taboo to ask, but do you have a favorite song like that you've written?
Oh yeah, I think probably right now at least it probably changes, but right now a song called "Through the Night" that's on the new album is I think my favorite song that I've written. I wrote it by myself, and I wrote it. I started writing it like 6 years ago, and I've rewritten it a couple times and finally finished it, and we're putting it on this album.
Awesome. That's great. And any dream collabs? I know you mentioned Crowder earlier, but is there anyone you would love to collab with?
Well, I've always been. I always tell people because I listen to a lot of old music, but my favorite current band has always been Need to Breathe.
Mm,
They're just great. I love their music. They've really kind of showed me how you can take the old classic music that I love and infuse that into today's world. And so they've definitely like inspired me a lot. So collabing with them or with Bear in any way would just be a dream. But, yeah.
yeah. And what is your favorite moment when you're on stage
Um.
of show or worship leading or?
Yeah, I would say the favorite moment of of the show is when we sing One Day,
Mm,
and the chorus comes in, and we just see people just like belting it out. It's like you never think people will sing your music, and then when you see them sing it with such like passion, you know that it's just really served them when they needed it most. And I think that's my favorite moment. It's just seeing the look on their face of like, I believe this, and this is really getting me through. Like that's just a really great feeling.
absolutely. So the song Thank God for Sunday Morning that you wrote a couple years ago and released, can you talk a little bit about that, what it means to you?
Yeah, it's just another layer of my story. Maybe church 2.0 as some people have called it. It's like chapter 2 in a lot of
Mm,
ways. Um it's me trying to be more transparent in a way that hopefully connects with people where they're at, that like there's you can be in some darkness,
mm,
and that doesn't mean that God's given up on you. You can really be finding yourself hurting and I mean, messing up in a lot of ways. And that doesn't mean that God has been scared off or that he's distanced himself from you. He's still pursuing us. And even in that darkness, even when Saturday night, you know, seems like it's just been such a horrible experience, Sunday is still coming. And
mhm,
Sunday morning is still coming, and that grace is still available. And I wanted people to feel that. I want people to know that I've been there. That as I stand on stage every night, I'm not trying to pretend like I've got it all together. I want them to know that, but I also want them to know where they're at. That if they're praying for someone, I see it on people's faces. It's like, I'm praying for my son or my daughter who's in the wandering in the wilderness. I'm praying that they come back home. And
mm,
I'm praying, or I myself, I just can't seem to kick this addiction or this thing that's drawing me away from the Lord. Like, is he mad at me? Where is he at in all of this? I want them to know that Saturday night is not the end of their story,
mm.
and the grace of the Lord will find them where they're at, just like a sunrise.
Yeah. Yeah, and that really speaks into that realness and that authenticity that you were talking about earlier too.
Yeah, yeah,
And that is so important because like you said, we all crave that. We all want realness. We don't want to be fake. And so when you are that real, people will tell the difference.
yeah. I think so. I think when somebody on stage takes the mask off, it
Mm.
frees the whole room to be like, gosh, I really thought that I was going to have to fake it this whole night, and now I can just be real too. And I think that's important. That's huge.
Yeah. Do you find it hard to be vulnerable when you're on stage, or is it a little bit easier because like you said, you're taking that mask off?
Yeah, it's definitely hard. And if we're being honest, there's parts of our lives that we may never take the mask off of.
Mm,
But the more that we can, and the more that we can share, like I struggle with this or with that, uh, every time I do that, it's terrifying in the moment, but it's always freeing afterwards, because there's always an experience where it's like, me too, you know, and then there's that connectedness, and there's that you're not alone, and you're not an island. And in the moment that you go from feeling alone to feeling connected to somebody else or to the Lord, it's like, like there's somebody else out there that's,
Mhm.
I'm not alone.
Mhm. And that feeling is amazing because feeling
Yes,
alone is not fun.
not at all.
Yeah. When we remember that there's someone else out there that knows what we're going through, it definitely helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So prayer is also really important. I believe it's powerful, and God has created it so that we can talk to him in this open communication. So how can me and anyone listening pray for you, pray for your band, your family in this life, in this season of life?
Gosh, I mean, anytime we go on tour, we're always happy to have prayers for our safety, for the tour's safety, like just for health in general, just that but I think also just praying that we can be effective
Mm,
on the road, that what we seek to do, and encouraging people, and lifting people up, that it you know that it actually does lift them up and encourage them. I think that
mm.
would be my prayer, that that it would just go well.
Absolutely. Well, can I pray with you real quick? Is that all right?
Yeah, please.
All right. Dear Heavenly Father, just thank you for the beautiful day that you've given us today. Thank you for the ability to have this conversation, to be able to talk about you and the hope that we can find in you, Lord. I pray for Michael in this season of his life that you just continue to work through him, and that he finds peace and hope in you in every step that he takes. And every time that he steps on that stage, whether it's worship leading in church or whether it's a concert, that he lets you steal the show, Lord, because you are why we're all here. So Lord, I just pray for his 2023, for his family, for his band, for the tour that he's on, and that you are there and present in every single moment. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
We all need
Absolutely.
hope every day. The only hope that holds a candle to anything is that which we find in Jesus Christ. Our hope is that you got something out of this episode featuring Michael Cochren of Cochren and Company. If you feel led, we would love it if you would pass it on to someone else in the search for hope. That's it for this month on And the Artist Is.